All right. Hello, hello, hello. Well, I thought that I would lend a few minutes to uh, both streaming, kind of showing parts of a documentary that I share in my courses called Slave Catchers and Slave Resistors, or Slave Catchers, Slave Resistors. This documentary was very profound in shaping, informing my view on the matter of anti-blackness and the way that anti-blackness functions in our society. So I'm going to start off by just playing a portion of the um, documentary. And as you're watching and listening to what's being shared, um, you may end up having your own reactions, so to speak. So I'll be talking through some of the pieces that are covered in the documentary as well as we're going along. So brace yourselves. Here we go. Let's see. Actually, let me go back here and make sure that I am sharing my sound too. All right, yeah, there it goes. We're good. Okay. Oh, wait. Yeah, here we go.
The following program contains depictions of violence and offensive but historically accurate racial epithets.
It is the summer of 1856. Slave catcher James C. Knox is tracking the escaped slave, Big Sandy. Knox owns no property and earns his living by hunting down runaway slaves. Knox needs the reward money. He has set out from East Baton Rouge, Louisiana, confident he will capture Big Sandy. Big Sandy has spent his entire life enslaved. Known for his contempt of white authority, he has been repeatedly whipped by his Louisiana owner, Robert Davis. He'd sooner kill than be returned to slavery. When Knox's trained bloodhounds finally track down Big Sandy, he refuses to surrender. They start to fight. For 15 minutes, the hunter and the hunted struggle. A final blow ends Big Sandy's dreams of freedom. James Knox fails to return Big Sandy alive and will not get paid. It's the cost of doing business when you're a slave hunter. Over a period of 300 years of slavery in America, slave owners would build a sophisticated structure to sustain this brutally corrupt and immoral system. A system of controls that began with militia, grew to include citizen patrols and slave hunters, and became so vast that by 1850, with the passage of the Fugitive Slave Law, every American was required to be a slave catcher. It is the late 1600s on a small plantation near Charleston, South Carolina, that Arthur Middleton has inherited. Middleton quickly doubles his land, making him one of the colony's wealthiest businessmen. Enslaved Africans teach him how to cultivate rice and provide free labor, enabling Middleton to extract enormous riches from the swampy wilds of South Carolina.
When some people talk about the creation of plantation society, I think about the creation of slave labor camps. That's what these are. The people are enslaved, they're laboring, and they're in a camp. If you could cope with the moral obscenity of it, you could become extremely rich. And that sort of bargain with the devil was one that was made very early by these Southern would-be planters.
As soon as enslaved Africans were brought to colonial America, they resisted, they fought back, and they ran away.
Would they go willingly into a situation of perpetual racial servitude? No way.
What you have here often is this conflict between humanity and inhumanity, between those who would deny human recognition to a human being and those who would assert that human recognition under the most drastic, the most dangerous of circumstances.
Parents try to be reunited with children. Children struggle to be reunited with parents by running away, not necessarily running towards freedom in the abstract, but by running towards family members that for them represent safety and security.
To stem the financial loss of slaves who escape, for whatever reason, South Carolina begins to experiment with different ways for catching them. At first, neighbors are asked to volunteer. Rewards are given to those who capture runaways. When this fails, the legislature passes a law in 1690 that mandates all whites to serve as slave hunters, requiring the entire white population of South Carolina to be a racial police force. Those who refuse to serve are fined. In cities like Charleston, night watchmen are paid to keep an eye out for slaves who violate curfew. They even try using their militia. Then, in 1704, the colony tries something new. They begin to experiment with small makeshift groups of citizen police called patrols. If the colony's system for catching slaves is inconsistent and uncertain, the punishments aren't. Runaways who are caught are brutally whipped. Their noses sometimes slip.
They were branded with hot branding iron on various parts of their bodies, sometimes on the shoulders, sometimes on the back, sometimes on the cheek, sometimes on the forehead. They were branded with the letters of the owners. They were branded with R for runaway.
In 1722, South Carolina, with the consent of some leaders of the Baptist Church, passes a law requiring all male runaways to be castrated.
You have to make it very clear that I own you and I own you for life, and I'm going to own your children and your children's children. And the repercussions of running away or resisting is physical. It's much more brutal than we understand.
In areas where slaves greatly outnumber whites, punishments are particularly brutal. These ad hoc methods of control manage to prevent large numbers of slaves from escaping. However, the colony is changing.
So I typically start kind of sharing that the beginning of the documentary with that clip, because I think it shines a light on just how sadistic the reality of trafficking in human beings was. I mean, it shines a light on some of the layers. But one of the most profound examples that's given in that brief segment is the reality that white people used their institutions, and specifically the legal system, to require all white people at that particular time in 1690 in the colony of Virginia to become a racial police force where Black people were concerned. And so white people were deputized and required to go out and catch anybody that they suspected to be a runaway slave. And I think that variable is gut-wrenching because it provides a window into the reality that white people have this untethered power, this uninterrupted power when it comes to Black people, where Black people are concerned. The other piece that was very profound, just within this small excerpt of the documentary, was the way in which leaders of the Baptist Church conspired with legislative officials, i.e. lawmakers, to create laws, a law that sanctioned the castration of Black males who ran away from slavery. Not only does that signify how serious they were about inflicting harm onto Black people and how serious they were about the institution of slavery, of enslaving Black people, but it also speaks to this, the degree of inhumanity, the degree of dehumanization and degradation that they feel concerning Black people, that there is such a hatred of African people, of Black people in America, that they would be willing, by any means necessary, to achieve whatever goals or objectives they had concerning the institution of slavery, concerning the enslavement of Black people, that they would be willing to castrate Black males. And I also think that we need to explore the, I think it was bell hooks, I'm not certain, there was someone years ago whose work I read, and they talk about, I think it might be Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, but white male genetic inadequacy, but also their inadequacy and the envy that they feel. I think it might have been bell hooks, where she talks about like penis envy, but the fact that these white men would sanction legalized castration of Black boys and Black men. When you think about the level of sadism, the level of vileness, the sadistic nature of a person or of people who would authorize, who would conjure up, really, who would think about, oh, let's just castrate them if they run away. How have we dealt with these realities on normal terms, in ways that are typical, in terms of our discourse, how we come to try and make meaning about these realities, how we understand them? Because we are talking about sociopathic, psychopathic predation. This is not ordinary, and we should not be discussing it on ordinary terms. And when we talk about the history or the enslavement of Black people, I think so much gets left out of this discussion, right? How America was built on the basis of prostitution and pimping out primarily Black women, and also grooming Black boys and men to be rapists, to engage in forced sexual arrangements with Black girls and Black women, and also how white men acting as consummate predators and authorizers of rape and rape culture, authorizers of pedophilia and child molestation, how they created a cultural apparatus that thrives on those realities. And we can see the remnants or the result of that type of cultural and institutional formation and orchestration. It's a violent, predatory culture. And unless we go back to the roots of this culture, we won't fully understand all that has been done, all of the actions that were taken to create America and to shape the culture that we find ourselves attempting to navigate. So I'm going to play a little more from this documentary, and I would love for those of you who are watching to maybe leave comments, your thoughts, potentially about what you're seeing and hearing and learning. And then that'll be part one. Okay, here we go.
As the plantations of Arthur Middleton and other South Carolinians grow, so too does their appetite for slaves. Until by 1708, Africans outnumber Europeans. By 1721, 1,000 enslaved Africans are arriving each year in South Carolina. And by 1730, 2/3 of South Carolina's population are slaves. But it isn't just the numbers that send a chill through the white community. Many of the new arrivals come from Angola in southern Africa. They know each other and speak the same language, and some possess military skills. The concern about one or two individuals escaping is becoming the fear of large organized groups running away, or a full-scale slave rebellion. Not long after Arthur Middleton assumes the role of acting governor, the news filtering in from Caribbean slave colonies is more than unsettling. In the 1730s, slaves in Jamaica rise up in rebellion and massacre their white owners. During the same time, Africans massacre 2,000 white families on St. John's Island, also in the Caribbean.
18th century South Carolina is a pressure cooker. The whites realize that they're outnumbered, and yet the people in charge are making so much money. It is so profitable that they're willing to run extreme risks.
South Carolina holds its breath. Slaveholders have made a deal with the devil. They had made themselves rich off the backs and brains of their slaves, but in doing so, they had put their own lives at risk, and they were about to trigger one of the largest slave rebellions in the colonies. It is the summer of 1739. A feeling of dread has fallen over the white population of South Carolina, still a British colony. With 39,000 Africans outnumbering 25,000 whites, the colonists are now a minority, and they sense they are sitting atop a volcano about to explode. Adding to the white population's fear, Spain, Britain's arch enemy, has built Fort Mose in nearby Florida, guarded by free black soldiers. Spain has also granted land there to escaped slaves for the first black settlement in North America. Then, news arrives that England and Spain have declared war. In order to destabilize their English neighbor, the Spanish openly offer freedom to any slave who runs away to Florida. Over 100 slaves have already escaped Fort Mose the previous year. To protect the colonists, the South Carolina legislature passes a law requiring all whites to arm themselves while worshiping at church, a time when they are most vulnerable. But 2 weeks before this law takes effect, the volcano erupts. Early on.
All right. Okay. So I'm actually going to stop it right there. And feel free to go online and you can access this documentary if you want to watch it by yourself. But the last point that I want to focus on or highlight is the level of paranoia that is contained within and amongst the white population and the white community. White legislators and white officials during this time period that's being discussed in this documentary, as well as now today, understand the infliction of violence that they have perpetrated around the world, and particularly in the African American community. And if you listen to what is being discussed in this documentary around this time period in the mid 18th century, the 1700s, white people understand that so deeply that what they are doing is sadistic, that it is violent, that it is wrong, that it's genocidal, that they are passing laws that constitute that white people can now carry guns at church. And so that's the 1739 Security Act. If you look up the 1739 South Carolina Security Act, that particular law required white people to arm themselves while at church service. So think about that. Why would people need to arm themselves at church if they're not guilty of any wrongdoing, of doing anything? And this is requiring the entire white population to carry guns. And again, it speaks to the intentionality of the wrongdoing, the acknowledgement of the wrongdoing, the fact that white people have to be paranoid and experience a type of chronic paranoia, schizophrenic paranoia, where they feel like they have to protect themselves against Black people. And of course you have to protect yourself against Black people. You're subjecting us to sexual assault, legalized sexual assault, culturally practiced sexual assault. You are engaging in predatory molestation of children, Black children. Of course you would need to protect yourself. So this documentary is very powerful in the ways that it features different philosophers, different academicians, and for its contents, in the ways that it parses out certain topics or variables that are not necessarily widely known or widely discussed when we talk about the institution of enslavement, white people's everyday attitudes and behaviors towards African American people, towards Black people. This documentary does such a profound job. So I will be sharing bits and pieces of it in weeks to come so that we can dissect it together. And again, I would love for those of you who are watching and listening, following along, to share your own thoughts and comments in the comments section. You can type it in. So this is part one of probably 4 to 5 parts to come, maybe 6 or 7, but feel free to join in next week too. All right. See you then. Peace.